My name is Melissa and I'm 45. Most people see me as successful. A woman who built her own life, running 2 restaurants and 2 cafés in this busy town. But what they don't know is how lonely it can feel. My days are filled with business meetings, paperwork, and endless calls. I'm constantly surrounded by people. Yet I've never felt more alone. My marriage ended years ago, and since then, I've thrown myself into my work, filling the silence with the hum of a busy kitchen or the chatter of customers. One rainy afternoon, I went to the grocery store. It's the little things I do myself that make me feel normal like any other person. I was lost in thought, staring at a row of coffee cans, when a voice broke through my haze. Are you trying to choose the best one, or are you as indecisive as I am? I turned to see a young man, maybe in his late 20s, with a playful smile on his face. His name was Ryan. He had this boyish charm and an energy that made me smile, something I hadn't done in a while. We laughed about the endless options on the shelf, and before I knew it, we were talking like old friends. I didn't feel like a businesswoman or someone twice his age. I felt like a woman enjoying a simple, unexpected connection. As we parted ways that day, he slipped a comment that stayed with me. I hope I see you around here again. You made shopping a lot more fun. I left the store feeling lighter, almost giddy, like a teenager with a crush. Little did I know that this chance meeting would change everything after that first encounter. I found myself looking forward to grocery runs, hoping to bump into Ryan again. It became a little game. He'd show up at the coffee aisle around the same time, flashing that disarming smile. We'd chat about everything and nothing, from the best brands of pasta to our favorite places to eat in town. I hadn't felt this alive in years. It didn't take long for these chance meetings to become intentional. We started grabbing coffee after our accidental rendezvous at the store. I was surprised at how comfortable I felt with him. Ryan was a breath of fresh air, so different from the business world I was used to. He was spontaneous and funny, not weighed down by the responsibilities I carried every day. We'd sit at a little cafe, ironically one of mine, and talk for hours. He'd share stories about his freelance work, his dreams of starting his own business, and the things that made him happy. I found myself laughing in a way I hadn't in years, feeling lighter and younger than I had any right to feel. It was as if his youth was contagious, breathing life into the parts of me I thought were long gone. One day, as we sat together on the café's patio, he looked at me with an intensity that made me blush. You know, Melissa, he said, leaning in a bit closer, I don't usually meet people like you. You're different. In a good way. I felt my heart flutter, a sensation I hadn't felt in decades. I tried to brush it off with a smile, but the warmth of his words lingered long after we parted ways. As I drove home that evening, I realized I hadn't just made a friend. I was developing feelings for Ryan, feelings I wasn't sure I was ready to confront. That night, I lay awake in bed, replaying our conversations in my mind. I'd laugh at something Ryan had said, then catch myself smiling like a teenager. It was a ridiculous, intoxicating feeling, one I hadn't experienced since I was much younger. I found myself drifting back to memories of when love was new and exciting, not complicated and tangled with years of shared history and responsibilities. As the days went by, the realization hit me harder than I expected. I was falling for him. This wasn't just a harmless crush or a fleeting infatuation. My heart skipped a beat when I saw his name pop up on my phone. The anticipation of our next meeting became the highlight of my day. It was as if he had brought color back into a world that had turned grayscale. But then came the doubts. What was I thinking? I was old enough to be his mother. I imagined the whispers, the judgments from people who'd see us together and think I was just another woman desperately clinging to her youth. I'd spent my life building a reputation, a successful business, a life people respected. Was I willing to throw that all away for a chance at this, whatever this was? I tried to reason with myself, convincing myself that it was just a phase, a fantasy brought on by loneliness. But every time I saw him, those doubts melted away. It wasn't just the way he looked at me, it was the way he made me feel seen. Like he understood me in a way no one else had in years. He wasn't judging me, or at least it didn't feel like he was. One evening, as we walked along the pier after dinner, the setting sun painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, he stopped abruptly and took my hand. Melissa, I've been thinking about you a lot, he admitted, his voice softer than usual. I don't know where this is going, but I don't want it to stop. My breath caught in my throat. There it was, confirmation of what I had been afraid to acknowledge. He felt it too. I wanted to say something witty, something lighthearted to diffuse the tension, but I couldn't. Instead, I squeezed his hand and whispered, "Neither do I." And just like that, the dam broke. All the walls I'd built around my heart, the fears of judgment and the insecurities about our age difference, they crumbled. In that moment, standing there with Ryan, I knew I couldn't keep denying what was happening. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. I was falling in love, and for the first time in years, I felt truly alive. The realization hit me like a tidal wave. I was undeniably in love with Ryan. And while it felt like I was soaring, the descent back to reality was hard and unforgiving. The rush of joy and excitement was quickly followed by a familiar, gnawing fear. I couldn't help but picture the looks of disbelief on my friends' faces. Or worse, the pitiful glances they'd throw my way. The whispers at the country club, the sideways looks at the grocery store. A woman like me, falling for someone so young? I'd be a laughingstock. Every time I thought about it, I'd tell myself to end it. "This is madness, Melissa," I'd mutter under my breath. "You're setting yourself up for heartbreak." But as soon as I'd see Ryan, all those worries melted away. He had a way of making me feel weightless, as if the years that separated us didn't matter. When he looked at me, I felt like the most beautiful woman in the room, even if I knew better. Still, the societal implications weighed heavy on me. I'd never thought of myself as someone who'd be swept off her feet by a younger man. I'd built a life on practicality and good decisions, expanding my business, raising my kids, ensuring stability. And here I was, ready to throw all of that into uncertainty for a chance at love. One day, we went for a drive up the coast, the sun setting behind us, casting a golden light over the water. It was beautiful and serene, yet my mind was racing. "What's wrong?" Ryan asked, sensing my unease. I tried to brush it off, but he wasn't buying it. He pulled the car over at a scenic lookout and turned to me. "Melissa, talk to me," he urged. His voice was so sincere, his eyes so full of concern. I felt the dam inside me crack. "I'm scared," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm scared of what people will say. I'm scared of how this ends. And I'm terrified of losing you before I've even fully had you." He didn't say anything for a moment, just reached over and took my hand in his, squeezing it tight. "Do you think I care what people say?" he asked softly. "I care about you, about how you make me feel. That's all that matters to me." His words should have comforted me, but they only made my fears more real. I wanted so badly to believe him, to let myself fall without worrying about the consequences. But I was too practical, too grounded in reality. I'd seen what happens when you let your heart rule your head. "I don't know if I can do this," I whispered, looking away, unable to meet his gaze. Ryan leaned closer, gently turning my face back towards him. "Melissa," he said, his voice steady, "we don't have to know how this ends. We just have to decide if it's worth taking the risk." I felt a tear slip down my cheek, and I knew in that moment that I was already past the point of no return. I could keep pretending I was in control, but the truth was, my heart had already decided. I was in love with him, and I didn't know how to turn back. He wiped the tear away with his thumb and pulled me into a kiss. It wasn't rushed or frantic. It was slow, tender, filled with unspoken promises. In that kiss, I found a moment of clarity. Maybe this wasn't about what people thought, or even about what might happen down the road. Maybe it was just about two people, right here, right now, finding something they didn't expect. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. After that kiss, it felt like everything changed between us. It wasn't just a fleeting romance anymore. It was something deeper, something I couldn't deny any longer. The next few days were a blur of emotions, highs and lows. Every time my phone buzzed with a message from Ryan, my heart would skip a beat. I'd find myself smiling like a teenager, pacing around my living room, reading and rereading his texts. But with every surge of excitement came an equally powerful wave of doubt. Could I really open myself up like this? Could I let him into my life completely, knowing the risks? I hadn't felt this vulnerable in years, and it scared me to death. One evening, as I sat alone at the dining table, a half-empty glass of wine in front of me, I made a decision. I couldn't keep playing it safe, holding back out of fear. Life was too short, and for the first time in a long time, I felt alive. I grabbed my phone, took a deep breath, and typed out the message that had been on my mind for days. "Hey, would you like to come over tomorrow night? I'd love to cook dinner for you." My finger hovered over the send button, heart pounding in my chest. I knew what this meant. It wasn't just a casual dinner invitation. It was a step toward something real, something intimate. It was me saying, "I want more." I hit send before I could change my mind, tossing my phone onto the couch and pacing the room. The reply came quickly. "I'd love that. What time should I come over?" I felt a rush of relief and excitement, mingled with a hint of panic. I was really doing this. 7 p.m., I typed back, trying to sound calm and collected. But inside, I was anything but. The next day was a whirlwind of preparations. I cleaned the house like a madwoman, dusting shelves, fluffing pillows, even lighting candles I hadn't touched in years. I wanted everything to be perfect, to show him a piece of me I hadn't shared with anyone in a long time. I cooked his favorite meal, spaghetti carbonara, a simple dish he'd mentioned once during one of our many conversations. It felt intimate, thoughtful, like a gesture of care. As the clock ticked closer to 7 p.m., I found myself standing in front of the mirror, smoothing down my dress, checking my reflection one last time. I wasn't used to this. Feeling nervous, feeling like I had something to prove. It was exhilarating and terrifying all at once. The doorbell rang, and I felt my stomach do a flip. I took a deep breath, steadying myself before opening the door. There he was, standing on my doorstep with that boyish smile, a bottle of wine in his hand. "You look beautiful," he said, his eyes soft and warm. And just like that, all my nerves melted away. "You're just saying that," I teased, stepping aside to let him in. He walked in, looking around my home with genuine curiosity. "No, I mean it," he replied, setting the wine on the counter. "I've never seen you like this, so relaxed, so at home." I couldn't help but laugh. "Well, I am at home," I said, rolling my eyes. But deep down I knew what he meant. For the first time, I was letting him into my world, showing him a side of me I kept hidden from everyone else. We settled into the kitchen, and I poured us each a glass of wine. The atmosphere was light, easy, filled with the kind of unspoken understanding that made everything feel right. As I stirred the sauce, he stood behind me, close enough that I could feel the heat of his body. He reached over, brushing a stray hair away from my face. "You know," he said softly, his voice filled with something I couldn't quite place, "I've been looking forward to this all week." "Me too," I admitted, turning to face him. For a moment, we just stood there, looking at each other, the air between us electric with possibility. This was it, the point of no return. I could feel it in the way he looked at me, the way his eyes softened, the way his hand lingered on mine. He wasn't just here for a meal. He was here for me, and I was ready to let him in. We ate dinner slowly, savoring every bite, every word exchanged. It was as if time had slowed down for us that evening. The candles flickered, casting a warm glow over the room, and the soft music in the background made everything feel like a scene from a movie. I couldn't help but steal glances at Ryan, watching him as he laughed, his head thrown back, his eyes crinkling at the corners. He looked so young, so full of life, and I felt a strange mix of excitement and fear. How did we get here? After dinner, we moved to the couch with our wine glasses, settling into a comfortable silence. He sat close to me, our knees almost touching, and I could feel the heat from his body radiating toward me. The conversation drifted, becoming softer, more intimate. We talked about his childhood, his dreams, the places he wanted to travel. I found myself sharing parts of my life I hadn't spoken about in years, stories of my past loves, my marriage, the loneliness that had followed the divorce. "It must have been hard," he said quietly, looking at me with such sincerity it nearly broke me. "Being alone for so long." "It was," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "But it's different now with you." He set his glass down and turned toward me, his hand reaching out to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear. The touch was gentle, almost hesitant, like he was afraid I might pull away. But I didn't. I leaned into it, closing my eyes for a moment, letting myself feel the warmth of his hand against my skin. "I've wanted to do this for so long," he murmured, his voice low and husky. Then why haven't you? I asked, opening my eyes to meet his gaze. Because I didn't know if you wanted me to, he confessed, looking at me with an intensity that made my heart race. I didn't answer with words. Instead, I leaned forward, closing the space between us. Our lips met softly at first, testing, exploring. But then something shifted. The kiss deepened, and it was like everything we had held back finally spilled over. His hands were in my hair, pulling me closer, and I wrapped my arms around his neck, losing myself in the moment. It wasn't just a kiss. It was an awakening, a release of all the emotions we'd kept bottled up for weeks. He pulled me onto his lap, and I felt his arms wrap around my waist, holding me as if he never wanted to let go. We broke apart, breathless, our foreheads pressed together. "Melissa," he whispered, my name sounding like a prayer on his lips. "This feels alright." "It does," I agreed, my voice shaky with the intensity of it all. "But it's so fast, Ryan. We barely know each other." He pulled back, looking at me with those honest blue eyes. "I know enough," he said simply. "I know that I want this. I know that I want you." I felt a lump form in my throat. It was everything I had been longing to hear for so long. But there was a part of me that was still afraid, still clinging to the old fears, the doubts about our age difference, about what people would say. "What if this is a mistake?" I blurted out, my voice trembling. He cupped my face in his hands, forcing me to look at him. "The only mistake would be not giving this a chance," he said firmly. "I don't care what anyone else thinks. I care about you, Melissa. That's all that matters." In that moment, I believed him. I let go of the fear, the hesitation. I let myself be vulnerable, be loved, and it was the most liberating feeling I'd ever experienced. I kissed him again, deeper this time, and he responded with equal fervor. We tumbled back onto the couch, a tangle of limbs and whispered promises, lost in each other. For the first time in years, I felt truly seen, truly wanted, and it was everything. As the days passed, our connection grew deeper, more complex. Ryan became a part of my life in ways I hadn't anticipated. He stayed over more frequently, his belongings starting to mix with mine. A toothbrush in the bathroom, a hoodie tossed over the back of a chair. It was strange, yet oddly comforting. Waking up to the sound of his laughter as he made us breakfast, the smell of coffee wafting through the house. It was a new kind of intimacy I hadn't felt in years. But the happiness came with its own shadows. At night, when the house was quiet and he was asleep next to me, I couldn't help but let the doubts creep in. I'd lie there, staring at the ceiling, wondering if this was just a fleeting fantasy. Was I foolish to think this could last? He was nearly 2 decades younger. What if one day he realized I couldn't keep up? What if he decided he wanted someone closer to his age? Someone who could give him a future that I couldn't? The fear of losing him gnawed at me, overshadowing the joy we shared. One evening, as we lay on the couch together, his head resting on my lap, I absent-mindedly stroked his hair. He looked up at me with a lazy smile, his eyes full of contentment. "What's going on in that head of yours?" he asked softly, his fingers tracing circles on my arm. "Nothing," I lied, but the hesitation in my voice gave me away. He sat up, turning to face me. "Melissa, talk to me. You've been distant lately." I took a deep breath, the words catching in my throat. How could I explain this to him? How could I make him understand the fears that came with loving someone so much younger, the insecurities I'd never felt before? "I'm scared," I admitted finally, my voice barely above a whisper. "Of what?" His brow furrowed, his eyes searching mine with concern. "Of losing you," I confessed. "Of you waking up one day and realizing that I am not what you want." He frowned, taking my hands in his. "Where is this coming from?" "It's just," I trailed off, struggling to find the right words. "You're young, Ryan. You have your whole life ahead of you. And I'm already halfway through mine." He looked at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he pulled me into his arms, holding me so tightly I could hardly breathe. "Melissa," he murmured against my hair. "I don't care about that. I love you for who you are, for the way you make me feel. I don't care about the age difference. I care about you." I wanted to believe him. I really did. And for a moment, I let myself sink into the comfort of his words, the warmth of his embrace. But the doubt lingered, a quiet voice in the back of my mind that refused to be silenced. "What if I can't give you the life you want?" I asked, pulling back to look at him. "What if I can't give you a family or the future you've dreamed of?" He took my face in his hands, his gaze steady, unwavering. "You already have," he said simply. "You've given me more than I ever thought I'd find. You've given me you. And that's all I want." Tears welled up in my eyes at the sincerity of his words. I'd spent so long believing that I was too old for love, too broken to be wanted. But here he was, this incredible, vibrant young man, choosing me. It felt like a miracle. "I'm scared too, you know," he admitted, his voice softer now. "Scared that you'll wake up one day and realize you deserve better. Someone younger, someone without all my flaws." I shook my head, cupping his face in my hands. "There's no one better for me than you, Ryan. I've waited a long time for this kind of love. I'm not letting it go that easily." He kissed me then, slow and tender, like he was trying to pour all his unspoken feelings into that single moment. And as I kissed him back, I realized something important. Love isn't about the number of years we have left. It's about the moments we share, the laughter, the connection. It's about the way he looked at me, like I was the only woman in the world. I'd been given a second chance at love, and I wasn't going to waste it. It wasn't long before the whisper started. A few lingering looks from the cashier at the grocery store, a pointed comment from an old friend over coffee. The rumors spread quickly. Melissa Fisher, the respectable businesswoman in her 40s, was dating a man half her age. The town buzzed with gossip, people assuming they knew everything about us based on appearances alone. They didn't see the quiet moments we shared, the depth of our connection that went beyond the years between us. I could have let it bother me. In the past, I might have. I'd spent so much of my life trying to meet everyone else's expectations, building my career, raising my kids, maintaining an image of success. But for the first time, I didn't care what they thought. I was done living my life by anyone else's standards. It happened on a sunny Saturday afternoon. We were at the local park, having a picnic by the lake. The sun shone brightly, casting a golden hue over the water, and the air was filled with the sound of laughter and children playing. Ryan was sprawled out on the blanket, laughing as he watched me try to keep a breeze from stealing our napkins. "You look like you're fighting off a pack of wild geese," he teased, reaching out to pull me down beside him. I flopped down, laughing as I fell into his arms. It felt so easy, so right? But as I glanced around, I noticed the stares, the disapproving looks from a group of older women sitting nearby, the raised eyebrows of a couple passing by. My laughter faltered, the weight of their judgment settling over me like a cloud. Ryan must have noticed, because he squeezed my hand and sat up, his playful smile fading. "Hey, what's wrong?" I hesitated, not wanting to ruin the moment. But the words tumbled out before I could stop them. "People are staring. They're judging us, Ryan." He followed my gaze, then turned back to me with a shrug. "Let them stare. Who cares?" "I do," I admitted quietly. "I've always cared." He was silent for a moment, then cupped my face in his hands, forcing me to look at him. "Melissa, we don't owe anyone an explanation." "Not for this," he said, his voice firm. "I love you, and that's all that matters." Hearing those words, "I love you," in that moment, it felt like everything clicked into place. It was so simple, so clear. I'd spent years worrying about what other people thought, about fitting into the mold they'd created for me. But here was this incredible man who saw me for who I truly was, and he loved me anyway. It was time I started loving myself enough to accept that. I took a deep breath, feeling a sense of calm wash over me. "You're right," I said, a small smile tugging at my lips. "We don't owe anyone anything." Before I could say another word, he leaned in and kissed me, right there in the middle of the park. It wasn't a chase kiss, either. It was the kind of kiss that made people stop and stare, that told the world exactly who we were and what we meant to each other. And for the first time in my life, I didn't care. When he pulled away, I was breathless, but laughing, feeling lighter than I had in years. The group of women who'd been watching us turned away, muttering to each other, clearly scandalized. But I couldn't stop smiling. As we packed up our picnic and walked back to the car, hand in hand, I felt a sense of freedom I hadn't known was possible. It didn't matter what anyone thought. I was in love, with a man who was younger, yes, but also kinder, smarter, and more caring than anyone I'd ever met. And that love, it had changed me. It had given me the courage to live for myself, not for anyone else. We drove home in comfortable silence, the sun setting behind us, casting a pinkish glow over the road. I glanced over at Ryan. His face relaxed as he drove, and I felt a swell of gratitude. I'd been given a second chance at happiness, at a love I never expected to find. I squeezed his hand. "Thank you," I whispered. He glanced at me, confused. "For what?" "For loving me," I said simply. "For showing me that it's okay to want something for myself." He smiled, lifting my hand to his lips. "Always," he promised. And as we pulled into the driveway, I realized something important. Life is too short to live for anyone but yourself. Love doesn't care about age or expectations. It's about finding someone who makes you feel alive, who sees you for who you really are and loves you despite it all. As we stepped inside, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I was excited to find out. Because I wasn't just living. I was truly, finally alive,